Nintendo's sales for their second quarter of this fiscal year have come in, and with this information we have some bad news to report. Sales are down. However, Nintendo has also recently said that their plans regarding a Switch 2 announcement within this fiscal year have yet to change. So today we're going to be diving into sales information, speaking more on this Switch 2 situation, and also providing a prediction on when Nintendo will finally announce a price drop for the Switch 1 family of systems. Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and let's jump right into things here. We're first going to focus on the Switch 2 news. I know most of you are interested in that. However, I will point out that we still don't have all the information yet. The Q&A with Nintendo's investors has yet to come out, and from there we may have some more additional details on Nintendo's Switch successor. So taking a look at this Reuters article that came out at 4 AM this morning, Nintendo cuts annual profit forecast 10% as Switch sales slow. So here they continue to say, Nintendo cuts its operating profit forecast for the year to March 2025 by 10% to 360 billion yen on Tuesday as sales of its aging Switch console lost steam. The forecast is below analyst estimates for profit of 391.4 billion yen. Here they also say Nintendo lowered its full year sales forecast for the console, which is in its 8th year on the market, by 7% to 12.5 million units. That will be down 20% from actual Switch sales of 15.7 million units a year earlier. It also revised down its annual software sales forecast by 3% to 160 million units. Quote, for a platform that is in its 8th year in the market, both hardware and software enjoy stable demand and brisk sales. This was said by Nintendo President Shuntaro Furukawa during the press conference. But it's also being reported that President Furukawa said there was no change to Nintendo's plans to announce a successor to its long-lasting Switch console in the current financial year to March, but did not go into specifics. So that's the official Switch 2 news we have at this point. Again, we may get more during the Q&A a little bit later, but is there anything to extrapolate from here? Because most people may take a look at this and say, okay, so literally nothing has changed since May 7th when they initially told us that they would give us more information on the console within the fiscal year. Well, technically, back on May 7th, Furukawa said this: we will make an announcement about the successor to Nintendo Switch within this fiscal year. So there is a slight difference here. They initially told us that they will be making an announcement about the Nintendo Switch successor, which we took to mean, yes, a reveal, but there was perhaps some room for debate. Now, I don't have a specific quote here, but from what's being said, here they're wording it as they have a plan to announce the successor. So it's very slightly different. Most people are probably going to interpret it the same, but I think this does tell us that we will have an actual proper reveal of the console before the end of the fiscal year. At the very least, a first look trailer like what we got for Switch 1. Now at this point, Team 2025, those expecting a reveal not until next year, appear to have won. That seems to be the case. However, there are those taking a look at this article from Reuters and reading this quote from industry analyst Hideki Yasuda and jumping to a conclusion that is yet to have been confirmed. Making an announcement this year has gone quite difficult. You would not want to divert attention to an upcoming console in the middle of the critical year-end shopping season, and thinking, oh, this confirms that the reason why Nintendo hasn't revealed the Switch 2 yet is because of holiday sales. But this is not coming from Nintendo. This is coming from an industry analyst who's weighing in as they're reporting on some of the news officially from Nintendo, so some people are getting a bit confused there. Now at this point, those who have been arguing that the holiday sales is the reason for not seeing a Switch 2 review up to this point obviously probably feel pretty good about their argument. I still don't necessarily agree, and I've explained why for that in the past. We saw how Nintendo announced the Switch 1 back in the holiday sales for 2016, where 3DS sales were still going pretty strong. If you take a look here, when the Switch was announced, 3DS sales actually went up in the following year. But then also, for that holiday season of 2016, Nintendo had a variety of holiday bundles, Pokemon Sun and Moon saw a record start to its sales, and Nintendo even announced the NES Classic Edition. If Nintendo makes no announcement during this holiday season for a Switch 2 reveal, which seems really likely at this point, in my opinion, it's simply because they're not close enough to release yet to reveal the console. That's it. Now, if we are going to get a reveal before the end of the fiscal year, let's assume that it happens on the very, very last day, which, again, seems unlikely, but Nintendo's had us waiting this long, so you never really know. If it's on March 31st, then I still think we have reason for optimism that the console may still be coming out relatively soon. We won't have to wait all the way until the holidays, as a lot of people are now starting to think. And the reason I'm saying this is fairly simple. The reveal to release window for Switch 1 was October 20th, 2016 to March 3rd, 2017. That is essentially 4 months and 2 weeks. Nintendo marketing cycles have trended to be faster. So while yes, it is possible that Nintendo may have a longer reveal to release, when you consider these trends and also that the Switch 2, from everything we've heard, is likely to be fairly similar to Switch 1, so there's not as much to educate on there, I would say it's pretty reasonable to expect a shorter reveal to release window rather than a longer one. And so if that's the case, we will not have to wait even 4.5 months after March 31st for Switch 2 to come out. In other words, I'm personally thinking that the latest we see Switch 2 come out is sometime in August. Now, maybe Nintendo has a slightly longer reveal to release window, and maybe this time it has to do with the fact that they would want to have a longer marketing cycle, not so much for the hardware, but for the games, which they've yet to show off. Last time, they had Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart to be the first two major titles on Switch, which we already knew about before the reveal of Switch 1. This time, we might have new titles like 3D Mario, which hasn't been shown off yet, so maybe we wait a little bit longer, certainly possible. And so I'm extra clear here, I'm not just saying possible as a small outside chance, but it's plausible. So there's definitely wiggle room, but the latest murmurings have been that maybe sometime between spring and summer we see the release of this console. But let's now start taking a look at the sales data, because there are other things to extrapolate here that I do think have very strong implications for the future. And before going forward here, let me just briefly ask that if you've gotten to this point and you do enjoy my content, to please subscribe and hit that notification bell. So here we see Nintendo's reporting their hardware sales. For the first 2 quarters of their fiscal year, they are down 31% compared to last year. The sales are trending downwards, and we've already brought up how Nintendo initially was planning to sell 13.5 million Switches this fiscal year, and now they've marked that down by a whole million to 12.5. Recently, we've been discussing how based off the first quarter of the fiscal year, things were not pacing to hit their targets, and now with the second quarterly results, Nintendo has adjusted that, even though many people refuse to believe that the trends were suggesting something. They have, and now even Nintendo themselves has conceded that they're not going to sell as well as they initially thought. And personally, I'm thinking sales are going to continue to trend downwards. Taking a look at this sales chart here, by the way, Pierre485 shared all of this financial information from Nintendo, a really great Twitter account. I strongly recommend you check it out. But taking a look at this sales data here, I think there's something that becomes very, very apparent. Sales have been trending downwards for years, and I don't think Nintendo is even going to hit their 12.5 million units unless they have a price drop relatively soon. But just to make sure everyone understands what we're looking at here, this is showing every quarter sales throughout the Switch's lifetime. Green is the first quarter, then yellow is the second quarter, blue is the third, and red, the reason why it's bigger is because it's the fourth quarter where we see, yes, the all-important holiday sales. But I went ahead and I did a little math here, and I noticed a very interesting trend. So I went ahead and I went year by year and added the sales for the second and third quarters and saw how they compared to the fourth quarter, the holiday sales. And this is what I noticed. In 2017, when you combine the second and third quarters and compare them to the holiday sales for the fourth quarter, the holiday sales outdid the second and third quarters by about 1.47. Then in 2018, the fourth quarter outdid quarters 2 and 3 by 1.85. In 2019, the fourth quarter outdid the prior quarters by 1.56. And then in 2020, the pandemic year where everything was thrown out of whack, the combined sales of the second and third quarter outdid the holiday sales. The fourth quarter just took up 90%, 0.9 of the combined second and third quarters. But then after this, in 2021, the fourth quarter was 1.28 times the total of quarters 2 and 3. And then in 2022, it was 1.23. And then in 2023, it was basically about 1-to-1, equal. And so we have this trend where the holiday sales continually get weaker in comparison to the combined sales of quarters 2 and 3. So why does this matter? Well, when we take into consideration that Nintendo is still forecasting a relatively high number of Switch sales this year, 12.5, they went down by 1 million from 13.5, but it's still pretty high, are we certain that they're going to hit their targets? They would still need tremendous sales during the holiday period of time to make this happen. And since in the last 3 years, the significance of the holiday sales has gone down a little bit year by year, we have a pattern. The holiday sales this time around are likely to be less than the combined sales of quarters 2 and 3. And the combined sales of quarters 2 and 3 is just 4.72 million. So I did a little math here. If we assume that the holiday sales match quarters 2 and 3 combined, which the pattern suggests it'll be less than that, by the end of this calendar year, the combined sales for the first 3 quarters of Nintendo's fiscal year would be at about 9.44 million. Nintendo is forecasting to sell 12.5, which would mean that their forecast would suggest that they are expecting to sell a little bit over 3 million units in those last 3 months of the fiscal year. But you see, what's interesting about that is when we take a look at this chart here, we look at the first quarter of each calendar year, there's also been a trend where that first quarter sales has been going down. 4.72, 4.1, 3.07, 1.96. So assuming the pattern were to continue, odds are they're not going to sell a little over 3 million Switches in the last quarter. They're probably going to sell less than 2. We already know about Nintendo's plans for the beginning of the fiscal year. There's no major Pokemon release like Legends EA. At this point, we pretty much know it's coming out closer to summer, if not even later. Nintendo's already told us about Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition for March. They've told us about Donkey Kong for January. These are remasters, not brand new titles. So really, when you take a look at the sales data, there's no history that suggests that Nintendo's even going to hit their now newly revised lower numbers. Unless they have a price drop. It is the only way that they're going to somehow hit their target. And you see, what's interesting about this is that while I've been hoping for a reveal all this year, something I have talked about is that a really strong sign for Switch 2 coming out would be a price drop for the Switch 1 family of systems. And that hasn't happened yet. And at this point, it's not happening for this holidays. They would have announced that already, I assume. We're already in November. They've had all these holiday bundles and all these different things. So what it's looking like right now is that this period of time where we're expecting Nintendo to reveal the Switch 2 because they've literally essentially told us that, also matches up to where Nintendo is probably going to need to boost their Switch 1 sales. Now, I don't think Nintendo can get away with announcing a price drop right after the holidays. That would not be a good look. But perhaps they could do so a fair bit removed from the holidays, maybe say February. Which interestingly, Nintendo has not announced a game for February yet. And they might not. It may simply be a month where there are no games. And perhaps this is when the proper Switch 2 reveal is going to happen. A month where they have no games, where the Switch 2 announcement would impact potential sales. I personally don't think this would matter, but I'm sure some people do, so I am mentioning it here. And so what I'm going to predict here is that by February, we're going to see an official price drop for the Switch 1 family of systems close to the reveal of the Nintendo Switch 2. Am I hoping that somehow Nintendo reveals the console sooner? Absolutely. Do I expect it at this point? Unfortunately, no. But before closing out here, let's talk a little bit about some software sales that I find interesting. And I'm just going over some more charts here from Pierre because they share a lot of really great data here. So, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom in just the last few days of September, because that's all we know, sales as of September 30th, 2024, it sold 2.58 million. So it sold 2.5 million in 5 days. That's pretty good. How will it ultimately compare to Link's Awakening? That is hard to say. Something that's interesting to note is that Link's Awakening performed better in its first quarter. However, Link's Awakening launched on September 20th. Echoes of Wisdom released on September 26th. Link's Awakening had a whole extra week to enjoy sales during its first quarter, and it only sold about 550,000 copies more with that extra week. So I think the jury's still out here. Echoes of Wisdom might be able to compete with Link's Awakening sales. The only thing really holding it back is that overall Switch sales have been trending downwards, including software. And, well, we're near the end here. Link's Awakening got to enjoy evergreen sales throughout the Switch era. But I think another cool thing to point out here is that Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door has nearly sold 2,000 million copies, 1.94 million. And this is interesting because Luigi's Mansion 2 HD has sold 1.57 million units as of September 30th, just so we're clear. So the data seems to suggest that Paper Mario: 1,000-Year Door is outselling Luigi's Mansion 2 HD, even though a lot of people felt that because Luigi's Mansion is a bigger selling series, it would outdo 1,000-Year Door. But so far, 1,000-Year Door has the edge. Of course, the holiday sales could change that. The last few things I'll point out is that Tears of the Kingdom has sold an additional 240,000 units, the same as Breath of the Wild, so Tears of the Kingdom is maintaining a similar pace, which is interesting. It's probably never going to catch Breath of the Wild, but it's interesting to see that it's maintaining some evergreen status as well. And then Pokemon Scarlet and Violet continues to get closer and closer to the sales of Pokemon Sword and Shield, and so eventually Scarlet and Violet is looking to overtake Sword and Shield and become the second best-selling set of Pokemon games of all time. And that's all I really feel like discussing today. I will have everything linked in the description below, of course, but let me know what you all think. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.